The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Hey folks, Brian Keene here. You know, summer's over. We're entering the fall and then the winter. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, and then of course the holiday shopping season. Speaking of the holiday shopping season, let me tell you about subculturecorsets.com. They've got everything you need for everyone on your list for this holiday season. Clothing, accessories, gifts, books, you name it, they've got it. They sponsor every show on the Project Entertainment Network, including this one. So please give them your business. Visit subculturecorsets.com.
Project Entertainment Network presents My Favorite Story, an anthology featuring short fiction written by the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network podcasts, with
Mary Sangiovanni and Brian Keene from The Horror Show,
Chuck Border, Aaron Sweet, El Mahari, and Armand Rosamilia of the Mando Method, Jeannie Engel of Origins,
Bizung's Mr. Frank,
Tom Clark from Necrocast, It On, It Cooks, Amber Fallon,
Three Guys with Beards, Christopher Golden, Jim Moore and Jonathan Maybury,
The Buttercup of Doom, Kelly Owen,
Matters of Faith's Jay Wilburn,
John Urbancic of Eight Stains.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology from Project Entertainment Network, available on Kindle, Nook, and soon in paperback from the Project Entertainment Network store.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden. And Brian, a more hearty Excelsior than ever today, because we are wrapping up Ed Hannigan's run on Defenders with 90 and 91.
Woo! Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior, true believers. But I have to say, Brian, before we begin, as you know, as listeners, as the three people who listen to this show know, I am not a fan of the Mandrill. I think the character is stupid and the concept is fairly sexist. However, I love the cover to issue 90.
It's fantastic.
I shouldn't, but I do love it. So, folks, Google that cover to Defenders 90. It's got the Mandrill looming in the background, holding a pair of scales, like the scales of justice. On one side, Valkyrie, Hellcat, and two members of Femforce are being outbalanced by Nighthawk, Hulk, and Daredevil on the other side.
You know what I don't understand about the cover?
What's that?
Daredevil is a long-standing member of the Defenders. You know, we've covered that. I don't know why they felt the need to add the little blurb, guest starring Daredevil. He's not guest starring, he's a Defender.
Well, I think probably because he had his own series, and they want to get people who read that series to read this comic.
Ah, yes, of course. The old marketing. I agree with you. The Mandrill is a stupid villain. It's a stupid character. But in the era of, men's rights activists and what do they call themselves? Incels, the involuntary celibate.
Yes.
Move.
Yes.
The right writer, the correct writer, could really do something with the Mandrill and really give us a meaty statement and comic book with the Mandrill. Unfortunately, I don't know that Marvel employs any of those writers anymore. So.
I think you're right. I mean, I think that a Mandrill story, the Mandrill would be the flagship or mascot character for the Incel movement. I don't even want to call it a movement because it's like so most of those guys don't move.
It's an adherence. Its adherents would consider it a movement. And for the older middle-aged listeners, like Chris and I, who aren't even sure what an incel, what is it? Isn't that the company that makes computer chips? Incel stands for involuntarily celibate, and it's a belief among many young men. It's actually a fairly broad-reaching thing in every industrialized country.
Is it though?
It is. No, it really is. I keep in mind I have two sons, one of whom is 10 and one of whom is in his mid-20s. And particularly with the older one, I get to see the world through his eyes, and yeah, it's a lot bigger than people our age give it credit for, which is scary. But basically, they feel that women in today's society are not having sex with them, and they are granted the right to have this sex, and they consider themselves involuntarily celibate.
I'm sorry, but
yeah, I want to clarify. My oldest son is not one of these chuckleheads. He makes fun of these chuckleheads, but he finds me all this shit online and sends it to me. Like these different message board forums and stuff where they have these discussions, and yeah, it's sad. But it is more widespread than people believe it is.
I don't want to be
thinking.
Yeah, I don't want to be one of those ranting old. I don't want to be Clint Eastwood on the front porch. But Brian, I just can't help but think that I'm laughing at myself as I say this, but I can't help but think that the everybody gets a trophy attitude is part of this too.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I mean, look, there's, I hesitate to say this because I worry to some of our younger listeners it may come off as sexist, but keep in mind, Brian grew up in a very different era.
Right.
I was a player when I was a young man. I've been very honest about that. Mary Sangiovanni is sitting over there grinning right now. Am I proud of my behavior looking back on it? No, I'm not. But, never once when I was doing the nightclub scene as a young man, when I was hooking up every night, never once did I feel that, the women I was talking to owed it to me and that it was mine by divine right or any of this nonsense.
Right, exactly.
If they weren't interested, okay, then I moved on to somebody else.
Right.
Wrath James White and I, author Wrath James White, he and I were actually talking about this late last fall when he was here at the house, and both of us lived that lifestyle back then, and neither of us had that attitude, and we were trying to understand why so many young men now have that attitude, and I think you're right. I think everybody gets a trophy, must play a part in it. Everybody's special. And it's the only thing I can think of.
Well, let's just state for the record, we try not to get into topics like, political topics or anything like that on this show.
This for three guys with beards.
Right. Yeah. This is more of a three guys with beards or horror show with Brian Keene topic. But I will say to our younger listeners, nobody owes you anything in this life at all, ever. Earn it. Anyway.
Yeah. If you're striking out the club, take a look at your hygiene. No, I'm not even kidding. Take a look at your communication skills. Are you staring at her breasts when you're talking to her, or are you paying attention to what she's saying?
Wait. I'm going to interrupt you here, and then we really should get to talk about the Defenders. But I'm going to interrupt you here and say, I don't care about your hygiene, and I don't care about your social skills, and you could have perfect hygiene and perfect social skills, and as far as anybody on the outside is concerned, and maybe you just haven't met somebody who's interested in you. So it doesn't matter. Yes. I mean, of course, everybody bathe. I mean, how hard is it to bathe? But that's not the point. The point is, it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, what you smell like. It doesn't matter if you are like, the most like handsome, attractive, charming, person on earth. Nobody owes you anything.
For example, take the Mandrill, for instance, as we start
Exactly.
with issue 90. We open with the Mandrill and Femforce, and Femforce is assembled, and he's putting them all on an airplane. The Mandrill, I dare say, probably has bad hygiene. I mean,
well, it's the stink of his pheromones that allows him to control women, which is that's the dream of the incel, right? I can
right.
stink, and women will love it. All right. Anyway, written by Ed Hannigan, drawn by Don Perlin and Pablo Marquez.
and the Mandrill is leaving Central America with the entire Femforce. He's going to New York City, and there he shall seal his victory and destroy the Defenders.
In a story called Mind Over Mandrill.
Dun, dun, dun.
Then he takes his really fancy, spaceship-looking plane with the Femforce at his beck and call, and we get the Mandrill's origin story, Brian.
Yes.
He wants to take revenge on his father, and by extension, all humanity, for condemning him for the sin of being different.
That's right, because he was born a mutant, just like the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
Exactly, except his mutant ability, aside from his pheromonal control over women, is to look like a Mandrill. Which is one of the less fortunate mutant powers. There's a reason he's not a member of the X-Men.
You know what I want to do now? I want to email one of the editors at Marvel who never ever accept any of my pitches. I want to pitch a relaunch of Supervillain Team Up, and I want it to be the Mandrill and Toad, the two mutants who had the misfortune of looking the way they did. That was their mutant power, was how they looked.
You should just pitch a mutant team book called Ugly Mutant. And it's led by Angel.
There you go.
And they all hate him because he's so good looking.
So basically the Mandrill, his origin here, it also recaps why he loathes Daredevil, one of the Defenders. Daredevil, as we said before, he was part of Daredevil's Rogues Gallery. And since Daredevil's a Defender, he's now crossing over into our title.
There we go.
If you really just haven't gotten enough of the Mandrill, maybe start with Daredevil 110. That's where the Mandrill saga unfolds.
Oh, great! All right. Well, yes. If you haven't had enough of the Mandrill, yeah. Anyway, so we go to Montclair, New Jersey, to the home of Patsy Walker, and now the home of the Defenders. Dolly, the housekeeper, is telling Valkyrie and Patsy and Bruce Banner that Kyle Richmond left in a huff this morning because guess what? Today is his court date.
That's right.
And of course, Patsy asks about breakfast, and Brian, we get the call back for the first time. Dolly says, "Sure, kid, if you don't mind having beans, that's all we have since your pal the Hulk went shopping." And we see the cabinets full of nothing but cans of baked beans.
It's a great visual. As we talked about on last week's episode, they send the Hulk grocery shopping. He comes back with all the baked beans in the store.
Yep. And then Valkyrie glares at Bruce Banner and says, "Well, if it must be beans." And Bruce is like, "Hey, don't look at me like that. I have no more control over the Hulk's actions than any of you." Anyway, this is the part I love. So
They take Valkyrie for her first trip to a fast food burger joint.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get Daredevil. He's trapped in the vault where he was trapped at the end of last issue. He can't get out. He cannot open the vault door. The only thing he can do to find out more about where he is, Brian, and this is a use of his powers that I'm not familiar with, because it seems strange to me, because in the past I've thought that his sort of radar sense didn't necessarily stop at the walls, and sometimes, but in this case, he goes to the air vent, and he's somehow sensing through the air vent what is on the other side of the wall.
Right.
It's kind of interesting.
It is kind of interesting. And I've seen that used in the 70s. I don't think anybody uses it today.
Okay.
I think probably right around the time Frank Miller started his legendary run on Daredevil, that was done away with. I don't see anybody doing that anymore.
Yep. All right,
by the way, I should apologize to our listeners and to our engineer, Tommy Clark, host of the Necrocasticon. I'm recording this episode. I don't know about you, Chris, but I'm recording it with the windows open because it is gorgeous outside.
Yeah.
Along the Susquehanna River. So you may hear traffic going back and forth. Or okay. Boats. I apologize for that.
That's all right. It's the traffic in the back of the Marvel offices in the 1980.
That's right.
I think it was Madison Avenue in those days. I'm not sure. In any case, they go to Doctor Strange's house. So Bruce and Valkyrie are dropped off at Doctor Strange's house. Valkyrie then flies away on Aragorn, who is now feeling better, thankfully. Hellcat takes off on her retractable claws, and she goes to investigate.
Right, and before she goes to investigate, she stops and picks up her shadow cloak. You'll remember her shadow cloak is just like the one that Devil Slayer wears. She got it during their battle with Vera Gemini. And, it opens dimensional doorways. Yeah.
Well, they've gone to the Midtown Manhattan building owned by Kyle Richmond or Richmond Enterprises. So she's gone, I think, specifically to get the shadow cloak, and she discovers that there's a hole in the wall, which we know happened last issue when Daredevil was there and he was abducted by Femforce, who show up at this very moment, to attack, and they have a fight with Hellcat, who uses her shadow cloak with great aplomb. And then it doesn't go well from there, Brian.
Right. She gets knocked out. Hellcat sinks into unconsciousness. We then transition back to the bank vault, where Daredevil, something else that doesn't get used a lot anymore, his billy club, his truncheon, in the 70s, it was sort of a James Bond thing. He could pull it apart, and there were all kinds of nifty things. It was like the Swiss Army knife of superhero accoutrements.
Exactly.
So he pulls it apart, and there's a fish hook and a fishing line inside, and he runs that through the air vent and finds a phone, picks up the receiver. Keep in mind, he's blind and doing this through an air vent.
Right, through his radar sense.
Yeah.
And he manages to hit the 0 with the receiver of the phone. He manages to hit the button for 0 to call the operator. And then he's shouting through the air vent to try to get them to connect him to the Manhattan Federal Courthouse. And though there's a little bit of argument back and forth, he succeeds in doing that so he can get a message because Kyle's trial is underway.
Right.
Or his arraignment, anyway, is underway.
Right. We then get a couple pages of courtroom drama. The prosecution is saying, that they bring up that Nighthawk started out a criminal, which we've covered previously on this podcast. Before his stint with the Defenders, he was part of the supervillain team known as the Squadron Sinister. Valkyrie has an outburst in court because, much like many other things on Earth, Valkyrie's unused to the protocol and the decorum. And the judge warns Valkyrie, one more outburst like that, you'll be arrested for contempt.
Yep. And then, of course, Rosenblum, the attorney working with Matt, who is representing Kyle, asks for an hour recess to address the thing that Daredevil called about. And the prosecuting attorney objects. Valkyrie gets pissed, and the judge orders Valkyrie to be arrested for her outburst.
Not the first time Valkyrie has been arrested in the pages of the Defenders.
Exactly. Although the arrest does not go well, although Nighthawk sneaks out in this moment of distraction, Hellcat shows up with Femforce.
And Hellcat is now a pawn of the Mandrill.
Exactly. And then the Mandrill himself shows up, and he takes control of Valkyrie again. You'll wield that sword for a better cause now, my cause. We have this. And then the judge, who's sweating, trying to resist his control. Says arrest that man. Actually, not resisting. She's ordering the arrest of Bruce Banner, who's objecting. And of course,
there's a weird bit of characterization here from Hannigan. Valkyrie, Hellcat, all the women are being taken over by the Mandrill. And Bruce Banner thinks to himself, Val, oh no, she couldn't withstand his weird attraction. I'll have to stop him myself. ... Somehow. This is Bruce fucking Banner.
Well,
if only there was a way he could stop the Mandrill.
Well, I think he's hoping to stop the Mandrill without becoming the Hulk.
Fuck that! If I was the Hulk, I'd never change back into Banner.
But he doesn't remember. He's on control. It's like all the times that you were blackout drunk and then you got sober again. You were like, I don't want to do that again. And then somehow you did.
Well, sure enough, all the women in the courtroom.
In fact, that should be your new comic book series. It should just be called Blackout Drunk.
Blackout Drunk.
And it's about a guy who gets giant and super powered when he gets blackout drunk.
You know what? That's not bad.
The problem is, he's drunk.
I'm going to pitch that Dark Horse right now.
Yeah, if anybody at Dark Horse is listening, the new comic book series from Brian Keene, Blackout Drunk. It's actually not a bad idea, Brian. And everybody, the 3 people who listen to this show, and Mary, just heard me say, you can have it.
All right. Well, sure enough, Bruce Banner, even though he's not blacked out drunk, he does turn into the Hulk in the middle of the courtroom. Meanwhile, Nighthawk has arrived at the bank where Daredevil is still being held prisoner in the vault. Yes. And he breaks out Daredevil, and the cops show up, and the cops are confused because, the only thing they know of Nighthawk is Dollar Bill's documentary series. And, they know Daredevil's supposed to be a good guy, and they're like, what are you doing here with Nighthawk?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so, to cut to the chase, Nighthawk rescues Daredevil. Daredevil and Nighthawk head back to the courthouse, where the Hulk is trying to stop Valkyrie and Hellcat and Femforce and the Mandrill from escaping.
In his own inimitable way.
Yes, in his own inimitable way, which means he rips the Mandrill's weird spaceship plane out of the sky, searching for Hellcat and Valkyrie. Nighthawk and Daredevil swoop in to help, and there's a Hulk versus Daredevil moment. And Hulk says, Hulk remembers now. Hulk thought you were dead, little man. You fought Hulk, and then you tried to help Hulk. He could have that dialogue with just about any hero in the Marvel Universe.
You can, but, it's... I know we are not as crazy about Hannigan's characterization as we are some of the other writers on the Defenders, but this... I've said it before, and I'll say it again. He does understand the Hulk and the Hulk's place in this book.
Yeah, for sure.
It's all about these are the only friends the Hulk has.
Yeah, and then I want to point out though, Brian, right after that is the best panel in this entire comic. When the Mandrill in full costume, because by the way, folks, I guess we failed to mention that at this point the Mandrill is wearing a costume that is reminiscent of like a cross between Doctor Strange and Quasar, for anybody who knows what the hell I'm talking about. And the Mandrill gets into a New York City cab and says, "The West Village, and hurry." Now, remember that for all intents and purposes, his head is the head of a Mandrill. And the cabbie says, "Sure, pal, you going to a punk rock costume party or something?"
Well, it is the Marvel Universe. I mean, these civilians are used to seeing Galactus show up and the Eternals.
Yeah, but it's broad daylight, and he's got the head of a Mandrill, Brian. And all I can think is that the cabbie is on acid.
Well, the cabbie is female, so maybe his pheromones are taking over her as well.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. I just thought that was a 1980 long hairstyle.
No, she's very specifically drawn as a female.
Gotcha. Now it all comes clear.
Yeah, I get a no prize for that.
You do. It'll be winging its way to you shortly. All right. Anyway, there's more fighting. Hellcat is under the Mandrill's control, fighting against Nighthawk.
Valkyrie is under the Mandrill's control, fighting against the Hulk.
Exactly. And let's see. And then let's see here. Hellcat is shocked out of the control of the Mandrill, but Valkyrie is not. Valkyrie takes off on Aragorn. And then we come back. Oh, you're right. I see now. We come back to the Mandrill in the back seat of the cab, with the cabbie under his control. And then we get back to the judge's battered courtroom,
which has been destroyed by the Hulk.
Yeah, exactly. And the judge says, "Mr. Rosenblum, your request for a postponement is granted." Yep.
Which then brings us to issue 91, the last Ed Hannigan issue.
And the cover of this is not great, but we'll move on from there. The cover shows the Hulk trying to prevent a deadly nuclear meltdown in one half of the cover, and in the other half of the cover, Valkyrie and Hellcat in battle.
That's right.
So
we open right back in the courtroom. Hulk is still Hulk. He hasn't reverted back to Banner. Hellcat, Daredevil, Nighthawk, Valkyrie, they're all in costume. Or excuse me, not Valkyrie. Everybody but Valkyrie. They're all in costume. And the judge has ordered Nighthawk into custody.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good opening panel, actually. It's a good shot of the Defenders gathered there. I'm happy that Ed Hannigan is sort of going out with this, Right. And again, to wrap up, the same team, which is actually, Brian, it's unusual for this book to have had the team of Hannigan, Perlin, and Marcos has been on the book sort of regularly. And even when they had a long-term artist, usually you had inkers coming in and out. There was no stability whatsoever in the art team. So that's what we can say for this sort of last run under Hannigan, is that we did have a sustained presence on the art. Right.
And the art has been one of the high points as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, she's put Nighthawk in jail, and then, it's revealed that the judge is still under the control of the Mandrill. So she then orders all of the Defenders remanded into custody.
Exactly. And I love the bailiffs. Stop them. It's the freaking Hulk.
It's the Hulk. It's the fucking Hulk. And how do you think Hulk reacts to this threat from the judge? Hulk says, "Hulk has watched and listened long enough to know that Judge Lady is crazy. Hulk will not stay here. Come on, cat girl." And he grabs Hellcat and he bounds away out of the hole in the roof of the courthouse.
Well, he actually makes a hole in the roof. And let's talk about this element of comics for a moment, because as a kid, these questions never occurred to me. But how is Hellcat not killed? So the Hulk grabs Hellcat under his arm and leaps upward, smashing through the roof of the building. Her head and arms and legs are totally exposed to the impact that would have had, that would have happened.
But she's wearing her shadow cloak.
Yeah.
And so any of the debris that would have hit her,
if you're bucking for a second no prize, you're not going to get it for whatever this stupid explanation is.
Yeah, any debris that would have hit her fell through the shadow cloak and got sent to another dimension.
No, that's not what happened.
Then she used her telekinetic powers that Moondragon,
which Moondragon took away from her already.
Oh, you're right. Okay, well then I'm sticking with the shadow cloak.
No second no prize for you. Sorry, that just doesn't work. Anyway, then we get back to Daredevil and Nighthawk, and again, I just want to point out how. Now, I don't like this costume. I like the original costume of Nighthawk's.
Right.
But it seems so weird to me that he was such a prominent sort of typical superhero character in the late 70s and the early 80s. And he's just vanished. There aren't that many that you can really say, like, were significant characters who really vanished. I mean, most of them come back eventually.
Right.
And Nighthawk is just gone. So it's an interesting observation, I think. For me, it's like I'd be curious to see what would happen if they tried to bring him back and do,
Well, they did. They did during the Civil War, the first Civil War crossover that Marvel did.
Which I read, so you see how much of an impact it had on me when they brought him back.
Well, he wasn't even in the main Civil War. He was in the Defenders series that ran for 6 issues. It was called The Last Defenders.
Oh, right.
And,
yep.
Tony Stark tasked him with building a new team of Defenders, and remember, Tony Stark had a superhero team for every state in the United States of America.
Right.
And the Defenders were assigned New Jersey. And that was the last time you saw this Kyle Richmond. Now, there's another Kyle Richmond Nighthawk from an alternate universe, the Squadron Supreme universe. Marvel has used him prominently, which I think is probably why we don't see this classic version anymore.
Right. Well, I'd like to see him back.
I would too.
Yeah. I'd like to see some Nighthawk versus Nighthawk action, but
although I got to tell you, the new Nighthawk, the Kyle Richmond from the Squadron Supreme reality, I really like that.
Yeah,
character.
I mean, great character, no question. That's why I said it would be cool to see them, to have a face off there. But
I like that he's the. I want to think of how to say this because I don't want to come across wrong here. If T'Challa, if Black Panther symbolizes the ideals of Martin Luther King, the alternate reality version of Kyle Richmond symbolizes Malcolm X.
Right.
And some of his methods just make for fascinating reading, fascinating character study. And yeah, I'd like to see him face off against our old school classic Kyle Richmond. I think there's a lot of meat there.
Yeah,
but again,
it'd be very interesting.
Yeah, do they have a writer in the stable these days that could do it? No.
You don't have a lot of faith. I have faith.
I have no faith.
Yeah, I think that the lack of self-confidence that always plagued this Kyle Richmond versus the total confidence in himself and his agenda of the Squadron Supreme Kyle Richmond makes for an interesting story. But anyway, we move on. There's a confrontation of sorts between Daredevil, or actually Daredevil speaking as Matt Murdock. Really, he's talking to Nighthawk about Kyle Richmond's legal problems. But Kyle Richmond is more concerned with Valkyrie and the Mandrill and what the Mandrill has planned.
That's right. We then transition to the Mandrill with the remaining members of FemForce that were not arrested and Valkyrie. She shows up and lets him know she is eager to join the fray, and he tells her that they will strike soon at the Arrowshaft nuclear power plant in upstate New York.
There you go. Now, I want to point out that we have yet another scene back at Hellcat's house, at Patsy Walker's house. Dolly has gone shopping, and Hulk opens the fridge, and the thought balloon is Hulk is hungry. And as the dialogue goes on in the background, we have Nighthawk has come up with a techno power bracelet for Patsy. It delivers a pulse every second or so just to keep her from falling under the Mandrill's spell. That's good. While that's happening, the Hulk has taken a whole chicken out of the fridge.
Not a leg, not a breast, not a thigh.
Whole chicken.
The entire chicken.
Like what is it? Is it Jake in the Blues Brothers who eats the whole chickens?
Yes. And he's drawn. Marcos draws this gleeful, joyous expression on his face as he's stuffing this chicken in his mouth. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. So there we go. And then Dolly thinks as they're flying off to try to rescue Valkyrie and stop the Mandrill, boy, what a strange bunch. Wonder what Mrs. Walker, may she rest in peace, would have thought of them.
Right.
So we have some characterization for Dolly, which will come further. So
we transition to Daredevil. He is stowed away on the Mandrill's airplane, So as the Mandrill arrives at the nuclear power plant, so does Daredevil. We also find out that there's a large amount of protesters outside the plant. They are the Mothers March Against Nuclear Power. And they are outside protesting even as the Mandrill arrives.
There you go. They're at a nuclear power plant that looks like 3 Mile Island, which had a nuclear leak issue in the 70s.
Which is exactly 8 miles up the river from me.
There you go.
There you go.
So no wonder you are with the way you are.
Careful, or I'll get drunk out black and smash.
It sounds like you are drunk out black already. Boy, folks, that should be the name of the book, Drunk Out Black. You don't even realize you said that.
I didn't. Let me explain why. Mary Sangiovanni is sitting 5 feet from me, and she's making little comments and little expressions, and I'm trying to keep up a running commentary with you, entertain our listeners, quiet the cats who have both gotten into the catnip and gone insane while we're recording.
Well, there you go.
Blacked out drunk.
Drunk out black.
Drunk out black.
Anyway, all right. It turns out that this whole thing has been contrived by the Mandrill to cause a nuclear explosion at the nuclear power plant, and he has contrived to have his parents, his hated parents, there at the time.
That's right.
And he pulls a gun on them. He identifies himself as their son, as if they needed to be told that this Mandrill-faced guy is their son who was a Mandrill. Somehow he needs to identify himself. The mother says, no, it can't be. The father says, we thought you were dead. Yes, the Mandrill says, that's what you thought, that's what you hoped, isn't it, dear father? I love the dear father
and
part.
Mother, aren't you proud of your son? He really is an incel.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. No question. Now,
you don't know about the power I've gained. He's saying this to his mother. Especially the power to exert total control over all women. Well, you know about it now. Good. The new nation must have a well-informed queen mother.
There you go. So he takes control of his mother, and then he and the Femforce put on these the radiation suits to protect themselves from what they're about to do. Hellcat shows up, with Daredevil and Nighthawk, and the fight ensues. I think we spent enough time on this bullshit, to be honest with you.
That's right. Basically, Hellcat uses Nighthawk's zapper to try to wake up some of the people that are under the Mandrill's control, but she's quickly overwhelmed by the Femforce. Meanwhile, inside the containment building, the nuclear power plant's containment building, Nighthawk and Daredevil show up to stop the Mandrill and the rest of his forces.
There you go. So we have Hellcat versus Valkyrie in a quite surprising turn of events, because now that Hellcat has her shadow cloak, she pulls a sword out of the shadow cloak to battle Valkyrie.
That's right.
And she's actually holding her own, which is completely ridiculous. The only reason that would happen, of course, is that subconsciously, despite the Mandrill's control, Valkyrie doesn't want to hurt her. So she's clearly holding back. And then we get Hulk.
Well, wait.
Go ahead.
Because we need to set this stage. So you've got Valkyrie versus Hellcat. You've got Daredevil and Nighthawk versus the Mandrill. Who is the Hulk fighting? Who is he fighting, Chris? Who is he facing off against?
Well, I would say he's fighting them, but anytime there's a large group of angry humans, the Hulk gets agitated, and he's outside facing off against the anti-nuclear protesters who are marching with their...
against the Mothers March Against Nuclear Power group.
Yes, and so Hulk says, puny humans, Hulk wants you to go away from here. Run or Hulk will smash. Somebody says, holy cow, who invited the Hulk to this demonstration? But of course they decide that they're going to run away screaming for their lives until Nighthawk shows up and says, basically, come on, jackass, we're supposed to be inside.
but he, again, props to Hannigan, some good characterization here. Nighthawk does take the time to compliment the Hulk, telling him he did a good job scaring the civilians away so that they won't be in the area when the nuclear power plant blows.
As if that was Hulk's intention the whole time.
And then Hulk finally comes up with a name for the Mandrill. Monkey Face.
Yes, that was my favorite bit.
Hulk can't wait to get his hands on Monkey Face.
Yep. Yeah. So we get there. Look, folks, we're, basically the Mandrill is inside one of these radiation suits. Hulk smashes through the wall. The Mandrill punches his father. He shoots at the Hulk, which of course is useless. And basically they're trying to save everybody. Hulk, you have to replace those control rods, which is look it up, folks. He has to basically stop the process that is exposing the radiation because it's going to blow up the plant and kill many, many people. Hulk does it, and of course the exposure to the radiation turns him back into Bruce Banner.
That's right, but he doesn't want to change. And I think this might be the first time, I'll have to research it, in modern Marvel comics, and even in Thor Ragnarok and Avengers Infinity War, we get these scenes where the Hulk takes control of the transformation or Banner takes control of the transformation. I think this issue might be the first time in Marvel Comics history where we actually see that, where he's reverting back and then Hulk says, no, you're not allowed to come out, and turns back into the Hulk right away, stops the transformation.
Well, he tries.
He tries.
And for a moment it works. But then, unfortunately, the effects of the radiation are too much, and he does transform back into Banner. And then the Mandrill shows up, and he has his gun, and he's going to shoot and kill Bruce Banner, except his own father shoots him and takes his life.
No, not his father. His mother.
Oh, it's his mother?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I saw the father in the background, and I thought it was the father. Yep. No. The father says, son, no, she finally did it. Maybe she was right. Maybe she was right the first time when she convinced me to leave him in the desert. I just couldn't believe that a mother would want her only child, no matter how hideous, to perish. That's why I left him near water in a place he might survive. And he did survive to come back and torment us. Nighthawk says, you didn't have to shoot him, lady. And she says, yes, I did. It was my responsibility. If I didn't stop him, no woman would ever have been safe. I think I sensed that when he was born. Now, I'm not going to make any further comments about incels, but it's an interesting story.
It's an interesting story. We then get a final wrap-up. The Mandrill may be dead, but Valkyrie is still under his control. But her friendship with Patsy Walker, a.k.a. Hellcat, wins the day, breaks the Mandrill's control. The two of them embrace. Valkyrie's crying and apologetic. And Hellcat says, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. Everything. And you know what? Truer words have never been spoken, ladies and gentlemen, because next issue, 92, the greatest Defenders run outside of Steve Gerber. If you had to pick Gerber or DeMatteis, which is your favorite run, Chris? Or am I putting you on the spot?
You know what? Honestly, rereading it as we go forward, I'll have to make the determination for myself, of course, who I think was better. But definitely DeMatteis is my favorite.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean he's better than Gerber, but it's the kind of story and the kinds of characters. It's all supernatural, not all, but there's a lot of supernatural stuff. There are characters who show up who are the weird, quirky characters I love.
Do you remember the Dr. Seuss issue, or have you not gotten that far yet?
No, I mean, I reread the whole thing a couple of years ago, but I haven't started rereading the DeMatteis issues yet. Yeah. So I read the whole Six-Fingered Hand thing a couple of years ago. So
that's fucking classic.
Yeah,
that's classic stuff.
Yeah, so I'm very much looking forward to DeMatteis, but let's have this conversation again when we've completed DeMatteis's run.
We will. Well, that brings us to the end of Ed Hannigan's run on the Defenders. It also brings us to the end of Defenders Dialogue. Before you go, though, we want to remind you of a few things. As I mentioned before, our engineer, Tommy Clark, he has a show called Necrocasticon. We encourage you to check that out. You might also enjoy my podcast, The Horror Show with Brian Keene, or Chris's podcast, Three Guys with Beards. All three of those shows are available via the Project Entertainment Network, wherever you are listening to Defenders Dialogue, be it iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Spotify, wherever. So we thank you for listening. Chris, you said on Twitter this week there are a lot more people listening to the show than you thought there were.
I heard that there were 7.
There are 7 now.
Yes, I keep saying 3, but I think there might actually be 7.
Well, 8 if we count Mary, who's sitting here in the background listening.
Yeah, well, she gets a front row seat, so there you go. I think that we have a special episode coming up, don't we, Brian?
We do. I want to remind folks. We mentioned this last week, but I want to mention it again. Chris will be globetrotting. Seriously, he'll be traveling the globe. He'll be in Romania and Newark, New Jersey,
which is a lot like Romania.
Yeah, he's going to be gone for the next few weeks. So I'm going to record some very special episodes of Defenders Dialogue, just so you have new content to listen to. When Chris comes back, like we said, we will dive right in to J.M. DeMatteis's and Don Perlin's run, starting with Defenders issue 92. So if you're reading along with us, you go ahead and start, and we will catch up.
Yeah, and this is a good opportunity, actually, Brian, for people to catch up if they've been listening but not necessarily reading along. The next 2 or 3 episodes following this one, will not be following the regular numbering of the series. So perfect opportunity for people to catch up.
Right.
And if you don't get the essentials, the good news is that there is a trade of the Six-Fingered Hand storyline, which is the highlight of DeMatteis's run. That's
still in print. So you can go to your local comic book store, Amazon.com, just type in the Defenders, the Six-Fingered Hand, and that trade paperback will pop up. If you're reading along in the Defenders Essentials, this will be Volume 5 that we'll be starting on. I think these are probably available on Marvel Unlimited as well. I'm pretty sure they are, actually. So there's a lot of ways you can read along, and you should, because it's going to be fantastic.
Yep.
We're going to have Ghost Rider. We're going to have the Man-Thing.
Son of Satan. We'll introduce the Gargoyle.
Devil Slayer makes his return.
Devil Slayer, yes, his triumphant return. And we finally have a characterization of Patsy Walker that Brian likes.
Exactly. And some deaths, too. Some very shocking deaths. I remember reading them as a teenager. I was more shocked by these deaths than I was the death of the Phoenix over in the X-Men. So lots to come, folks.
Yep. Excellent. All right.
Send us home, Chris.
Brian, I send you home and say farewell for a couple of weeks with a hearty Excelsior, true believers. Thanks for sticking with us. And we will see you soon.
See you soon, folks.
Three Guys with Beards. The Project Entertainment Network store, featuring t-shirts, mugs, stickers, hoodies and more from your favorite Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Ink Stain Scribbler's Rest.
The Horror Show with Brian Keene.
Why not show your loyalty by wearing a cool product from the podcast group and show off to your friends?
It Cooks.
Armcast.
The Mondo Method Monster Attack.
Necrocasticon.
Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and click on the store tab for more details.
The Liars Club Podcast.
Bizarre. The Lunch Ladies Book Club.
Matters of Faith.
The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with stuff from the best podcasts on the internet.
The Curtain Jerkers.
Buttercup of Doom.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
Do you love comic books and consider yourself a die-hard fan? Then you need to listen to Parlapod. We have news, reviews, and interviews with your favorite pros, all while bringing some serious laughs. New episodes drop every Wednesday in time for New Comic Book Day. Parlapod is available on the Project Entertainment Network, all major podcast outlets, and parlapod.com. Tune in and fuel your fandom with Parlapod.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.